Good evening and welcome to Mining the Riches of the Parsha, but tonight we're going to focus on Pesach, which starts this Monday night. Tonight is Thursday night, April 18th, 2024, and I am so happy that you are here to be able to study together. I would have thought everybody was busy cleaning for Pesach, so I really appreciate that you set aside the time that we can be together. I just want to mention, tonight is the last time for this season that we'll meet at 8 p.m. Next week, April 25th, is in the middle of Passover. We will not be meeting. We will resume 2 weeks from tonight, May 2nd, with God's help, and we will resume at 7 p.m. So we'll be back to our regular time of 7 p.m., and hopefully, with God's help, going forward consistently. I like sandwiches. I like sandwiches. And we have a sandwich coming up at the Seder, the Hillel Sandwich. The Hillel Sandwich, as you know, at the Seder, is a sandwich that's made with matzah and maror and charoses. Zecher lemigdash kehillel. This is a reminder of the times when the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, was standing according to the opinion of Hillel. Kain asa Hillel bizman shebeis hamikdash hayakayin. This is what Hillel used to do when the Beis Hamikdash was standing. Koreich Pesach matzah umar. He would take the Pesach, the carbon Pesach, that's the Paschal offering. That was roast lamb, which you can imagine how delicious it was, aside from all the spiritual aspects, but just how delicious roasted lamb over an open fire was. So a piece of lamb, matzah, and maror, v'ochel biyachad. He would take all three and eat them together. L'kaye mashenemar, in order to fulfill what is said in the Torah, al matzah sumrorim yochluhu. Together with matzah and maror, you should eat the carbon Pesach. So Hillel understands that literally. You take the carbon Pesach, the sliced lamb, and you put it on top of some maror, romaine lettuce, let's say, and matzah. And you make a sandwich and you eat it like that. That's the Hillel sandwich. And that's the paragraph we say in the Haggadah. Okay? When we look at the source of this particular sandwich, which is in the Gemara, it's in the Talmud, this is actually a quite complicated sandwich. And it holds deep meaning, and it holds the key to an essential theme of Pesach. Let's start with a passage in the Talmud. Shahayu amru alav al Hillel. It was said about Hillel that what he would do at his Seder, karchem bevasachas. He would take the Pesach, the meat, the maror, and the matzah. He would wrap them together into a sandwich to fulfill what's like the literal meaning of the carbon Pesach, the meat, on together with the matzah and the maror. Okay? There are two problems. First problem is that the Talmud continues and says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Chalkin alav chaverav al Hillel. The Chachamim, the majority of the scholars, disagreed with Hillel. Hillel was the minority opinion, and therefore Hillel's opinion is not normative. The normative opinion, the halacha, the final ruling in Jewish law, is that we do not eat them all together. Well, if the final ruling is we do not eat them all together, why in the world would we have a section of our Seder where we make this sandwich if, in fact, it's not the correct procedure? That's problem number one. Problem number two is the next statement in the Talmud. Hachi amar Hillel. Hillel said the following rule. Lo nichruch inish matzah umaror bahadi adadi v'nechel. You should not make a sandwich if all you have is matzah and maror without the Korban Pesach. Meaning, Hillel is saying, my idea about the sandwich is when you have all three. The Korban Pesach, which is the roast lamb, together with the matzah, together with the maror, you eat all three together. But Hillel himself says, if you are living at a time when there is no Korban Pesach, like we, for the last 2,000 years, since the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, we do not have the Korban Pesach. We do not have that roast lamb at our Seder. So Hillel himself says, you do not eat the matzah and the maror together, even if you're going to add a little charosis. So even Hillel is of the opinion that we do not have Koreich today. We do not have a Hillel sandwich today. So again, why do we do it? I want to share with you an approach that's based on the writing of Beis Halevi, one of the great ancestors of the Soloveitchik family. There is a central question about Pesach, about the narrative of Pesach. And this central question is reflected in a paradox that expresses itself throughout the entire Seder. And the question is as follows. When the Jewish people left Egypt, was it at the end of their allotted time in exile? And therefore they left Egypt with the expectation that the redemption of leaving Egypt was permanent, that they were going to go directly to Israel and live there permanently without any further exile? Was that the understanding of the Jewish people? Or was it in fact the case that they were taken out of Egypt before the time that God had originally intended to redeem them? Because God decided that the Jewish people could not survive any longer in Egypt, but with the proviso that because God is taking them out early, before the time that he had indicated, there will have to be a time when that it is made up, meaning there will be another exile that will follow sometime in the future. Now, both of those opinions are quoted by our rabbis in the Medrash. Both of them are based on verses in the Torah. And both of those opinions are expressed and represented throughout the Pesach Seder. Let's start with a pasuk back in Bereshis. God says to Avraham, Yadoa teda, ki ger yeh zaracha beretz lo lahem. You should know that your descendants will be strangers in a strange land, in a land that is not theirs. Va'avadum v'inu osam. They will be slaves. They will be persecuted there. Arba meo shana, for 400 years. V'gam es hagoy asher yavodu don anochi, and the nation that persecutes them, I will punish them. V'acharei kain, and after 400 years, yetzu, they will leave, they will go, they'll be redeemed, birachush gadol, with great wealth. God says the persecution, the slavery will last for 400 years. The problem with that verse is the Jewish people were only in Egypt for 210 years. And even of those 210 years, the slavery was only 86 years. So how do we reconcile God saying that we're going to be slaves for 400 years when in fact it ended up only to be 86 years? That's a classic question, and there are three classic answers to that question. Answer number one. God is counting the years from the birth of Yitzchak, not from the time the Jews go down to Egypt. Because from the birth of Yitzchak, they are be'eretz lo lahem. They're in a land that does not belong to them because the land of Israel had not yet been given to them. So The 400 years doesn't mean they're going to be in the same place for all 400 years. For a while, they're going to be here, and then they're going to be there. So it was a total of 400 years. So they served the full 400 years, just not the way we thought in Egypt. It counts also the years before they got to Egypt. That's answer number one. They finished the 400 years. Answer number two is that the harshness of the servitude and the persecution during the 86 years was equivalent to 400 years. Meaning, when God said 400 years, God had in mind you're working 9 to 5, you have an hour off for lunch, you have a coffee break in the morning, a little time in the afternoon, you can leave early on Friday, a regular work week. But the Egyptians worked them so hard with such difficulty and pain and suffering. The amount of work that they did in those 86 years was equivalent to what would have been expected of 400 years. Okay. So, according to this opinion, they served the full term. It's just that it was speeded up because of the harshness of the time. All right. But there's a third opinion. And the third opinion is, based on the words in the Medrash, Dileg es HaKadosh Baruch Hu al HaKetz. God skipped over the period of time and came and redeemed the Jewish people before 400 years. Shenemar, this refers to a verse in Shir Hashirim, Song of Songs, that we read next Shabbos, the Shabbos of Chol HaMoed Pesach, Medaleg al HaHarim, Kol Dodi Hinei Zebah, behold, the voice of my beloved is coming. Medaleg al HaHarim. He is skipping over the mountains. Mekapetz al hagvos. He's jumping over the valleys. That is an allegorical way of saying that God came sooner to redeem and to take the Jews out of Egypt. And the reason is because God saw that the Jews in Egypt were deteriorating spiritually. They were assimilating into the wider culture. And they had to be taken out right then, while they were still recognizable as the descendants of Abraham. But according to this third opinion, the balance remains. God took them out early, but the balance of the 400 years remains and must be endured in the future. In other words, the redemption from Egypt was never intended to be a permanent redemption. It was always with the understanding, because it came early, that there would have to be another exile to come to make up the time. And this explains a curious verse near the end of Bereshis. After Yaakov learns that his son Yosef is still alive, Yaakov makes the decision. God tells him to go down to Egypt with his entire family. That's how we end up in Egypt. And the Torah tells us that Yaakov is afraid to leave Israel and to go to Egypt. And God says to him, Al tira merida Mitzrayim. Yaakov, don't be afraid of going to Egypt. Anochi ered imcha. I, God, am coming with you. I will go down with you, Mitzrayim, to Egypt. Vanochi alcha gam ola. Now, the way we would translate that is, God says, I am going to go down with you to Egypt, and I will certainly take you back up to Israel. But the word to take you back up is repeated, alcha gam ela. I will return you. Literally, it would be, I will return you and return you. What does that mean? Why the double language? Well, our sages say, according to this opinion, Hevtichu, God is making a promise to Yaakov, Dim Yisrael yitztarchu, yalosam gam tochazman, that if it becomes necessary, because the Jewish people are assimilating, God says, I'm going to take them out of Egypt, even if it's before the time, even if it will mean that there will be a future exile, and I will have to take them out of that future exile also. I'm willing to do that, God says. This is the philosophical argument between the Chachamim, the rabbis, the majority, the consensus, and Hillel. The rabbis say each food has to be separate. Maror, matzah, Pesach. De'belayla zu ha'Yisrael mishubadim. We want to remember that on this night, the anniversary of which the Jewish people who had been enslaved were redeemed. So therefore, the order of the foods that we eat, which are to help us tell the story and recall the story, first we eat maror. That recalls the bitterness of servitude. Then matzah, and then Pesach at the end, each one separate. The Korban Pesach, the meat, the roast lamb, obviously expresses the redemption. And the order of the foods is meant to express that the redemption from Egypt, the exodus from Egypt, is final. It's permanent. This is the chronological unfolding of events. Maror, and then matzah, and then Pesach. Of course, today we do not have the Korban Pesach, but our order still remains maror and then matzah, which is what we do at the Seder. Hillel says that the Korban Pesach, the roast lamb, was eaten together with the matzah and the maror. Hillel says the servitude is not over. The exile is not over. Maror, the bitterness of the maror, is not only in our past, but it is in our present and will be in our future. And therefore, Hillel says each bite must contain all three tastes, all three foods, all three meanings come together in each bite. That's why there's a Hillel sandwich. The halacha is like the Chachamim. The decision in Jewish law is like the consensus. First we have maror, then we have matzah. Of course, today we do not have the Korban Pesach, but that's the order that we have in our Seder. And they're separate. Maror by itself, matzah by itself. Each one is separate in chronological order. During the time that the Beis HaMikdash was standing, and after the Mashiach comes and the Beit HaMikdash will be rebuilt, that is the practice we will have, and we will not have Koreich. We will not make a sandwich, because that's not the correct procedure. Hopefully, we are near the end of the years when we will have the Koreich sandwich. Hopefully soon we will remove that paragraph from the Haggadah. But we do it like Hillel because it resonates with our predicament. How can we, over the last 2,000 years, and especially this year, how can we relate to this opinion of the consensus rabbis that the exodus from Egypt was a complete and final exodus when we ourselves are suffering in exile? How can we possibly relate to that opinion? And so even according to Hillel, we would not do the sandwich today, because even Hillel says you don't make a sandwich out of matzah and maror alone. But we make that sandwich. And we say the words, Zecher lemigdash ki Hillel. We are remembering Hillel's opinion, even though it's not a mitzvah. We do not recite any bracha for this sandwich. Ultimately, this Koreich sandwich is about cognitive dissonance. It's about holding conflicting emotions at the same time. It's like breaking a glass under the chuppah that we've discussed before. Even in turmoil, we must find reason to celebrate and not diminish the celebration because of the turmoil that we have. And it is that dissonance and complexity that we should think about as we eat the Hillel Sandwich. When we eat the Hillel Sandwich, we should be thinking about October 7th. We should be thinking about the hostages. And we should be thinking about our brave men and women of the IDF who have given their lives, who are ready to give their lives to protect Medinat Yisrael and Am Yisrael. We should be discussing that. That's the essence of the Hillel Sandwich. And this theme of the cognitive dissonance that we're going to be experiencing this Pesach, this theme runs throughout the entire Seder over and over again. I'll share with you just a few examples, and there are many, many more. Just a couple of examples. We have 4 cups of wine. Why do we have 4 cups of wine? Well, the Talmud says, Keneged Daled Lashonei Geula. There are 4 words used to express redemption. 4 words about freedom. So 4 cups of wine. That's what Rashi says. The Talmud says something interesting about the wine. The Talmud says, Rabbi Yehuda says, Tzarach shehei bo tam umara yayin. It has to have the taste and the color of wine. The wine at the Seder should be red. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Code of Jewish Law, Tzarach lachzor achar yayin adom. You should make sure to have red wine at the Seder. Im ein halava meshubach mimeno. If you have a white wine that's actually a higher quality than the red wine, you can use the white wine. But preferably at the Seder, you should have red wine. Why? Why is it important to have red wine at the Seder? Well, because at the time of the Talmud, red wine was much better. It was higher quality. White wine was considered inferior. Even today, just the statistics show that people drink more red wine than white wine. Many, many people still feel red wine is more special. You want to have the best, the nicest wine at the Seder. Because the wine is a symbol of our freedom. Says the Taz, one of the classic commentators to the Shulchan Aruch, why do we have red wine? Zecher ledam. It's a reminder of the blood. Shehaya Paro shochet b'nei Yisrael. Paro used to slaughter the Jewish people. And we have red wine to remind us of their blood that was spilled. It's a jarring, I would say repulsive association. Which is it? Is it a symbol of freedom and celebration? Or is it an act of mourning and sadness? Cognitive dissonance. Karpas. In the Manashtana, the 4 questions, we ask the question, why do we dip the vegetable into salt water? It sounds like it's chayrus. It's fancy to take one food and to dip it into another. It's like an elegant meal. Sounds great. Why is it salt water? As a reminder of the tears of the Jewish people. Karpas is a symbol of freedom and a symbol of slavery, a symbol of redemption and a symbol of exile. Halach ma'anya. We begin telling the story by holding up the piece of matzah. This is the bread of poor people. This is what our forefathers and foremothers ate while they were slaves in Egypt. Matzah is a symbol of slavery. Later in the Haggadah, we have a different paragraph. Where it says that matzah is a symbol of freedom. because we were in such a rush to be able to be taken into redemption and to leave Egypt. We left hastily. Yes, I spoke about that this morning and gave another interpretation of this, but matzah is both. It's a symbol of exile and it's a symbol of redemption. Manishtana, we have 4 questions. Of course, it's not really 4 questions. It's really one question. Manishtana halayla zemikal alilos. Why is tonight different than other nights? But if you look at the 4 questions, they're about symbols of slavery versus symbols of freedom and redemption. And the real question, the one question, Manishtana, is, which one is it? What are we doing tonight? Are we commiserating with the slavery and the exile? Or are we celebrating the victory and the redemption? And we're asking, why is it so ambiguous? Charoses. We have this food called charoses. I've spoken about this before in depth. There are many, many recipes for charoses and many different reasons for charoses. One reason for charoses, it should be something that is thick. So the Ashkenazic practice is often to have ground up apples and nuts and a little wine, sweet wine. Zecher letit, it's a reminder of the mortar, the cement that the Jewish people had to use to make the bricks to build the buildings for Paro as part of their servitude. Charoses is a symbol of slavery, of persecution. But there are other recipes for charoses. There are recipes for charoses that list all the different foods that are mentioned in Shir Hashirim, which discusses God's love for the Jewish people. Pomegranates and figs and dates and honey. And it's not a reminder of something sad, it's a reminder of something beautiful, the close, intimate relationship between God and ourselves. So again, charoses, is it a reminder of slavery? Is a reminder of redemption. I've just shared a few of the examples. There are many, many more. It pervades the entire Seder. So we still have Koreich. We still have the Hillel Sandwich until Mashiach comes. And that's because it is our task, especially this year, to try to see joy, to look for the seeds of redemption, even if it is incomplete, even if it is overshadowed by the terrible events that are going on. Pesach for us is an exercise in latching on, holding fast to simcha and celebration and joy, all the more so because of its fragility. And so we recall Koreich. It's a complicated sandwich. It's a multifaceted sandwich with different bites and contrasts and flavors. But we yearn for the day, as we say at the end of the Seder, Lashana Haba B'Yerushalayim, that next year we hope to be able to be celebrating Pesach in Jerusalem in peace. And then, when that ultimate redemption comes, then we will follow the order of the normative ruling that we eat each food alone in chronological order. Maror for our past bitterness. Matzah and then Pesach. Alone. Where it reflects not only the historical narrative of the past, but it also reflects our own experience. And that is the taste, once we have that, that will remain with us forever. My friends, I wish for you this year a Pesach that is meaningful, that is thoughtful, that contains elements of joy and celebration, even as we remember and discuss the difficulties we are facing. And may this Pesach lead to a full redemption, so that the bitterness, the maror, is only in our past. I wish each of you a beautiful Shabbos. This Shabbos is Shabbos Haggadah, the Shabbos before Pesach, and a kosher, inspiring, and meaningful Pesach holiday. Thank you very much.